After a devastating disaster that destroyed homes and communities across rural Jamaica, serious questions are now being raised inside Parliament. During a recent government meeting, members of Parliament began pressing officials for an answer about housing support, damaged infrastructure, and the slow coordination between government ministries. Two voices stood out during the discussion. Member of Parliament Juliet Holness Nekeisha Burchell. And what they reveal paints a troubling picture.
Some questions for housing from the first two questions.
Right. Just some comments to what you would have said, member. In terms of, in addition to the building grants, we still continue our regular programs in terms of our officers going out, doing the investigations, recommending grants for approval to fix roofs and other parts of the building. And we'll continue. I'm listening to the members, and we'll have further discussion with the Minister of Housing, who is the Prime Minister. I want to also advise, because you did speak about how buildings, you alluded to how buildings should be, and you are saying, in terms of how do you restore them and all of that. A committee that is now being chaired by Minister Montague is in operation, and in fact, within a short time, there will be some announcements as to the types of buildings that will be supported in the country. And even there are increased discussions about having no-build zones. Because when you look at the devastation and you look at where some persons are living and you look at the engineering solutions, even to address what has happened in some of the houses, it certainly would be way more expensive to effect an engineering solution than the actual building that is there. And so these are discussions that the ministry is actively having, and very shortly some announcements will be made by the Prime Minister. These are matters that are actively being discussed by the cabinet. Even simple things like recently we convened a meeting with the Master Builders Association, members of academia and other persons from the engineering societies and so. And what we are learning is that even nails are not really being recommended for the roofs. We're thinking about screws, things like those. And even the thickness in terms of the concrete. So very shortly we'll have those. I know the building codes are there, but I think too that it is perhaps, and this is my opinion now, some need for more enforcement, greater levels of enforcement. And also I think there's a need for sensitization of persons. When we educate persons about how structure should be built, and sometimes it is really just coming down to what they can afford. But we're thinking now in a more long-term way. It's not just putting up people in shelters, it's really providing shelters that can withstand the weather events that we are seeing, that they are now becoming more frequent and more intense. So I'm taking notes, members, your feedback is not lost on me for further discussion. So thank you so much.
There was but
in terms of different ministries and agencies are interacting with state constituencies at the same time. In terms of dividing that work.
there was if you read the report of the PAAC last year post burial, that was one of two recommendations they made. Ministry of Labor, I think, is the main culprit there, MLSS. They do an assessment, they share their information with nobody. So you don't know if they have helped somebody who you then put back on your list to go to, and they claim it's data privacy. I can't understand it's all government, so, but somehow one ministry seems to be siloed, one agency seems to be siloed rather than it being government, and there's data privacy. I read the report of last year's post-burial similar exercise, and that was one of the two recommendations, that there has to be a way to share information across, whether it be what the members of parliament are identifying, what the housing ministry is identifying, what the labor ministry is identifying. It just seems we're all operating in our silos without the benefit of the data from each other.
Take that on board.
But there are other persons who have their mic on, and if they turn it off, then they will lose their space in the line.
Yeah. So
I'm trying to turn on your mic, but I don't want. Okay, go ahead now.
I was saying there are some things that can help other members of parliament, but your point is well taken, Chair. When the Minister of Labour and Social Security came, by then I'd already visited each home that was affected or got information that they would still need to verify for particularly one community that was cut off. And we said to them, when you've completed that process, could you please share the information back with us so we know if you have identified other homes? And to date, they have not shared anything, even though they were so happy to accept all the data that we had gathered. So it is something, PS, that it would be good if you take that up at PS meeting with the permanent secretaries for the other ministries, because it doesn't make sense, especially for constituencies like in St. James, Westmoreland, St. Elizabeth, where the devastation is so vast that we are not taking the benefit of the information or the data gathered by the various ministries and agencies and pooling it together.
if I may, Chair, if I may respond to that comment. We're not perfect as a government, and I'm happy that my PS counterparts are here from the Ministry of Labour as well as from local government. And I hear the comments and I read the report that you mentioned from the Auditor General. Since then, the truth is that we have met and we are looking to see, because we recognize that we can't do it all. No one ministry can do it all, and government can no longer operate in silos. And so my PS counterparts, they are here, and they would have known the discussions that we would have had in terms of sharing information on the beneficiaries and the whole idea of not double dipping, but we are saying that at least, we're not saying you can't get a benefit from Labour and get one from the Ministry of Economic Growth and Infrastructure Development. But we are saying that when that data is available to all of us, we'll be able to make decisions. In terms of giving someone, it might be giving someone who has got no benefit at all than someone who has benefited 5-6 times. So that collaboration has started. It is not perfect, but indeed it is a work in progress. And my PS counterparts, they are here. We'll see how we will accelerate that.
All right, Ms. Burchell.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Hunter, you said that in this phase, we're really focusing on giving people access, whether 1 or 2 lanes. But relocation is something that I think we have to think about for some of our communities, that still, even with the 1 lane or the 2 lane, it's added hours upon our commute. And also the taxi fares have increased, quadrupled in most cases, from $250 in most of my communities to as much as $1,000. So Melissa has brought a lot of terror, but some lessons as well and some opportunities. Would a relocation of the Springmount Road, for example, in East Central St. James, which is the main thoroughfare for us from Montego Bay into deeper South St. James, be something that we accelerate, front load now. Also the conversation of making that passage from Trelawney into Magotty that comes through St. James, could that also be looked at urgently before people start to make their own little route, and then the bigger picture is missed, and the blessing, if I dare say so, from Hurricane Melissa of recreating this new path be accelerated? I wanted to say to you, PS, that perhaps we ought to look at the disaster zones separately and differently than how we treat with the other constituencies. And I say that to say, an MP like myself, every day I'm out there trying to beg food for constituencies. For constituents. I'm not yet at the stage where I can dedicate my mind physically or my thoughts to saying, how do I go find 100 special people to give this housing benefit to? And then myself go there and geotag and walk the communities and find these houses. Perhaps your ministry can't employ or give stipends to every constituency, but a constituency that's dealing with a disaster at the scale of which South St. James, East Westmoreland, etc. are dealing with and treating with, perhaps the ministry could take on the administrative workload from us. And I do see it. I hear, rather, that there are representatives from the MLSS, from SDC and wherever else, and maybe from MP's office, who are in the space collecting data, and it's causing quite a problem. Because when I say I'm not aware of who is collecting data, because they say, oh, they're only collecting data from a certain set of people versus that, I don't know, because there's no communication from the ministry to say, we have trained 2 persons and they're going into these communities to collect data. So I'm then going to be stretching myself to collect this data when you're already collecting it. So the overlap, I get the point of the overlap, but it's even more entrenched, a more difficult problem in the disaster zones that you have to treat separately than how you treat. I mean, I heard Member Holness said that within a week or so, I'm paraphrasing, she was able to get to her people and get the data out. They were able to access it, Down there, it's night and day, as she's saying, for us to go in to get the data. So when I heard Miss Monique Gibbs, yes, our data person said that the assessment is 190,000 or so buildings that have been destroyed. In our case, in South St. James, a house, when you look on Google Earth, I could tell you my house was here, but it's no longer there because I didn't really have no foundation. You understand? So when the wind come, the tornado come, it split up the house, as the man said to me. Not split up the house. It split up the house. Because when I say, can you go find some piece of wood, find some plyboard and zinc, he said, I don't know where to start because everything split up. Right? So going to geotag a location and saying the house was here and then it's an empty spot may seem as if I'm fluffing the data, but it is our reality. And your data, your radar won't capture that a house once stood here. Because a house may have been just a little square, but it was my house and it no longer exists. So this 190K data, I know you say it's about 80% or so accurate. I want us to treat the disaster constituencies differently. Let's not rely on technology only. Let's fold in from now, the people who go in the field, collect the data and see that in one community, I've lost 100 houses. So for me to choose this $10 million that has been allocated, for me to find 100 people, it's one person per community. If you understand what I'm saying. So this opportunity that we have to treat with deep rurals and disaster constituencies differently than we treat with the other constituencies, even understanding that they have their own issues. But we need administrative support from the MLSS. We need the coordination. We need the information to know when you're operating in our spaces so that we can then not duplicate the effort. And we need, Sir Hunter, we need our roads to move from just drivable or passable to being thought out as giving us rehabilitated, fully developed roads. We deserve it now. For time come now, forget some proper roads into deep rural constituencies like South St. James, and Melissa is opening that for us. Thank you.
Just to add to that question about the data, can that satellite radar images, which are 88% accurate, that's much more data than we have now. Could that be shared with the members of parliament? Go ahead. I'm trying. Go ahead.
So we can create the data in a way that's ingestible by the by the members of parliament. So we can give you a listing of the type of damage of the buildings in your constituencies and share it either by a digital map or an application on your phone, whatever is best for you, or a printed map, whatever is best for you. We can share that data. We can create it in a format that you can easily digest it.
I think that would be appreciated by everybody, even in terms of this particular grant. And everybody is saying it. You know, you have water more than flour. You know, you have 10 times the amount of potential. But if you could see, you know, spatially where the concentrations are, it would better help you figure out how to allocate it so that you don't take care of one community and 10 more are omitted. So it really was more a suggestion or than well, if I were to reformat into a question, it is there going to be any possibility of getting some administrative support and for the whole coordination effort, especially in the hardest hit constituencies, which look almost, in some cases, post-apocalyptic.
During the meeting, Juliet Holness focused on a major problem that could be affecting disasters recovery across the country: the lack of communication between government ministries. Holness pointed out that the Ministry of Labor and Social Security often conducts assessments and gathers information about families affected by disasters. But according to her, that information is not always shared with other ministries responsible for housing and rebuilding. This creates a serious issue. Some families may end up receiving assistance from multiple government programs, while others who desperately need help might be completely overlooked. Holness referenced a previous report which had already warned about this problem and recommended that government agencies work together more closely. Her message was clear. If ministries continue to operate separately, disasters recovery efforts will remain slow and inefficient. While Holness focused on government coordination, MP Nekeisha Burchell described the devastating reality that many residents are facing on the ground. Burchell represents communities in St. James that were heavily affected by the disaster, and according to her, the situation is far worse than many people realize. She explained that in some cases, housing were not just damaged. They were completely wiped away. Entire structure disappeared. She shared a powerful story from one resident who told her that the tornado didn't just damage his home, it completely tore it apart. The house was simply gone. And this creates another challenge for government officials. Satellite technology that is being used to access damage might not capture homes that were small wooden structures or houses that have completely disappeared. This means the official numbers of destroyed homes may actually be lower than the reality on the ground. Burchell also urged that disaster-hit constituencies should not be treated the same as other areas. She explained that MPs in these communities are overwhelmed. Another major issue raised during the meeting was transportation. Burchell explained that many roads in rural communities were badly damaged during the disaster. Even when roads are passable, they are still difficult to travel. In some cases, taxi fares have increased dramatically because routes now take much longer to travel. Some residents who used to pay small transportation costs are now paying several times more just to move between communities. This highlights another challenge for disaster recovery. Communities also need reliable roads and infrastructure to truly recover. Government officials at the meeting explained that they are using satellite radar technology to identify damaged buildings. According to them, the technology is about 88% accurate. They also suggested that this information could be shared with members of parliament through digital maps or mobile applications. This would allow MPs to see exactly where the most damage occurred in the constituencies. However, several MPs emphasized that technology alone cannot replace the reality on the ground. Field visits and community assessments are still essential to understanding the full scale of the damage. The discussion revealed the difficult road ahead for Jamaica as it works to rebuild communities affected by disaster. From housing destruction to damaged infrastructure and government coordination challenges, the recovery process will require strong planning and cooperation between ministries, local representatives, and affected residents. But as MPs like Juliet Holness and Nekeisha Burchell made clear during this meeting, improving communication and prioritizing disaster-hit communities will be essential if the rebuilding effort is to succeed. The question now is whether the government will move quickly enough to deliver the support that thousands of families are still waiting for.